Again today the Gemara, Daf Samech, we're starting at the very last line on Daf Nun Tes Samud Beis. We're talking over here about the Seder of the Aliyahs for the Torah that the Mishnah said that there's Kayin, Levi, and then the Yisrael. The Mishnah continues here regarding the Seder of the following Aliyahs as well. So Sholcha lebnei Gelila le Rab Chelbai, Achareyen mi Kayin. After Kayin, Levi, and Yisrael, so what's the order of the Aliyahs? So Rashi here says that this is referring to Shabbos, when there was, before the Gemara said on Shabbos there's a lot of people in the shul, and if you don't have a Seder for the Aliyahs, there can be fights about this. So is there any Seder for the Aliyahs after this? So Le'ave biyodeh. So Rab Chelbai didn't have the answer to this. So also v'shayle le Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So he asked Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha the question whether there's an order for the later Aliyahs. Amalei, and he said to him as follows: Achreyen, after Kayin, Levi, and then the Yisrael. So who comes first? Kairin Talmud Chacham, we call for the Aliyah a Talmud Chacham, Hamemunim Parnasan Malatzibur, and a Talmud Chacham that's appointed as a leader for the people, for the Tzibur. Then Vachreyan, after him, Talmud Chacham, you bring a Talmud Chacham, Harauyin Lemanaisim Parnasan Malatzibur, someone that is not actually appointed to take care of the Tzibur, but he's fit, he's on the level, that he could be taking care of the whole Tzibur. Then Vachreyan, the next Aliyah, B'nei Talmud Chacham, the sons of these Talmidei Chachamim, Sha'aviseyen Memunim Parnasam ala Tzibur, whose fathers are appointed to take care of the Tzibur. And then Vachreyan, then following this, Roshei Knesiyos, the ones that are the Gabayim of the shuls, that's what it seems like Roshei Knesiyos means. Some Rishonim say it means they take care of all the matters of not only the shuls, but also B'chlal, all matters of the Tzibur, Tzedakah matters, and so on. And then V'chol Adam, along with everyone else that can get an Aliyah. So some say that the Roshei Knesiyos v'chol Adam actually go together. The Roshei Knesiyos don't have any preference; they don't come before Kol Adam. But some say no. The Gemara means first Roshei Knesiyos and only afterwards Kol Adam. So here you see the Seder of the Aliyahs, that it goes by the Cheshivas basically. And there's the famous Inyan. It says in the different Sfarim when it gets to the Cheshivas of the Aliyahs, Shlishi is considered to be, based on what the Gemara here says, the Choshev Aliyah, the first Aliyah of Yisrael. And then there's other places, Al Pi Kabbalah, it says that Shishi is the Chashav Aliyah. And there's the Minig, the Rabbeim, the Rebbe would always get Mafter, which also has a very big Cheshivas. Okay.
And that's why there are a lot of seats in the back of the show.
Shalchalei b'nei Galil Rab Chelbai. So the people of Galil, or the same like we had before, Glila, that they send another question to ask Rab Chelbai, Ma'u likrais b'chumashim b'beis HaKnesses. When you read the Torah in Shul, can you read not from a full Torah, but from a Chumash? Now over here when it says Chumash, it doesn't literally mean like the Chumashim we have today, because then everything was written in a scroll. But the question is, if you don't have a full Sefer Torah, they can't afford to write a whole Sefer Torah, could they have just a scroll that is written just a fifth? That's the term Chumash. Chumash means just a fifth, meaning just the Chumash Bereishis, or just Chumash Shmais. Could they read from such a scroll? B'tzibur, for the tzibur. So Le'ave b'yodeh, he didn't have an answer to this question. Also, Shaila Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So he asked the question to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha again, and here Le'ave b'yodeh, he also didn't have the answer. Also, Shal b'medrasha. So he came and asked the question for the students in the Bis Medrash. Upashtua. So they resolved this. Mehada Amar Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni Amar Rab Yechanan. So what did he say? Sefer Torah shechaser yiriya achas. If you have a Sefer Torah and it's missing just one yiriya, one page or one amud, ain't kairim by. You can't read from it from the Sefer Torah for the tzibur. So they wanted to say that it's the same thing, using just a chumash, one scroll that has just one chumash bereishis, let's say. So then you can't read from it. It's missing. It doesn't have the whole Sefer Torah. But v'loihi, this is not a comparison. Why? Over there, you have a whole Sefer Torah, and if now one Yuriya is missing, so then it's not kovedik. It is something that's missing here in this full Sefer Torah. So you can't read from it. Over here, there's nothing missing. You want to use a scroll that was l'chatchila written just one chumash. So maybe that is allowed. So here the Gemara brings it. Rabbe v'Rav Yosef the Amri Tarvayu. Rabbe and Rav Yosef both said, "Ein kairim b'chumashim b'beis haknesses." You can't read from this scroll that has just one chumash in it in shul mishum kovet tzibur, because it's not covered for the tzibur. So the Rashba here says, why is this not covered for the tzibur? Because you're basically showing that the tzibur can't afford to write a full Sefer Torah, so it's not covered for the tzibur in public to read from one chumash. That's the covered here. So you have to read after from a full Sefer Torah. Now the Gemara continues and says, Rabbe Rav Yosef, the Amri Tarvayo, a similar thing, Rabbe and Rav Yosef both said regarding the Haftarah. So the Haftarah is read from different psukim in Navi. So, hi, Seifa Haftarta. if you make a sefer, instead of having the whole nach that's written also, it's written in a scroll, but the whole Nevi'im to be written together, or the whole Nevi'im and Ksuvim to be written together, and you read out of that the portion of the Haftarah. So if you have a Sefer Haftarah, which is a Sefer that you just wrote those sections that's used for the Haftarah. Also, Asa Lemikribe. It's also, you're not allowed to use this, you're not allowed to read from this. When you write Navi, it has to be a Dovish Biksav that's written properly, the whole Navi together. You can't write skipping around and just making a Sefer of the Haftarah. So also Lemikribe b'Shabbos. My time, what's the reason? Deloi nitten likasa. It's not supposed to be written this way. You're supposed to write at least one full sefer together. That's what Rashi says, which sounds like Rashi says, let's say if you write the whole sefer Shmuel or the whole sefer Malachim, whatever it is, that's okay. But just skip around writing the pieces of the Haftarah, you're not supposed to write it that way. We'll see soon in the Gemara, this is based on what the Gemara later says, that when it comes to Torah Shebiksav, so there has to be dafka dova shebiksav. It has to be written properly, the full sefer, not just pieces. Ma Baravashi added to this that if so, little tulinami yasa. On Shabbos, you wouldn't be allowed to move it. It would be muktzah as well. If you can't read from it, so then it becomes muktzah. Like anything that you can't use on Shabbos becomes muktzah. My time at the whole if you can't read from it, so then you can't use it, you can't move it. But the Gemara says about this opinion of Rabbi and of Yosef here, V'loihi, this is not so. Shari little tule, you are allowed to move it. It's not muktzah, and also v'shari lemikribe, and you also are allowed to read from this sefer that's written just of the Haftarah, because Rabbi Yochanan v'Rab Shimon ben Lakish, both Rabbi Yochanan and Ish Lakish, ma'ayni b'sifra the agadata b'shabbata. They were using a sefer which had written in it agadas, stories of the Torah, not of this. This is not stories of the Torah, but Agadatis, Tam Agadis, that they were reading from a scroll that they wrote, and they were reading from it on Shabbos. But this is something that wasn't supposed to be written. So it wasn't supposed to be written this way. So how could they read from this on Shabbos? How was this written this way? And how did they read from this on Shabbos? Right? So the Gemara here is based on what we're going to learn soon here in the Gemara, that Dvarim Shebal Peh, Torah Shebal Peh, originally was not supposed to be written. So all these agadatis, which are from Torah Shebal Peh, was not supposed to be written. So if so, they're not supposed to learn from it, but we see that they did have Torah Shebal Peh written, and they learned from it on Shabbos. They didn't. It wasn't muktzah. So what's the answer? Ella, the answer is, as we'll see soon in the Gemara, kiv and lo yafsher, because it's impossible otherwise. As we learn from the pasuk, it says, "Eis lastas lashem heifeder teiresecha." When it comes the time, so for the sake of heaven, you're allowed to desecrate what Torah says. Meaning over here regarding this inyan that Torah Shebal Peh, these agadatis, were not supposed to be written, but because they saw came a time when everyone was forgetting Torah Shebal Peh, so then they were mated to write Torah Shebal Peh. So too over here, Hachanami over here regarding this sefer of the Haftarah, if it's impossible otherwise, and Rashi says what this means is, if the tzibur can't afford to have the whole Nevi'im and Ksuvim written together, and they just have this sefer that they write the Haftarah in it, so you can read from it, because of Eis Lasas Lashem Efeiret Teiresecha. Okay, so it's interesting. So Benegeh to the sefer, the scroll of the Haftarah, the Gemara is concluding here that because they can't afford it, you could just write the sefer of the Haftarah. But Benegeh to the sefer Torah that you read from, the Gemara's maskana before was you can't read just from one chumash. You can't just write the scroll of a portion of the sefer Torah. You have to have the entire sefer Torah, because otherwise it's not covered at tzibur. Huh? People have it. The what? The sefer of the Haftarah, a scroll of Haftarah? I don't think so. I think we're passing like a scroll of just Haftarah, or just Haftarah, or that has the whole Navi in it, and you. But my question is, does it have the whole Navi in it, and just from the Haftarah? Okay, could be. Could be.
Rabbi, you saw this?
Yeah. Okay, the Gemara has a similar shaila now. B'chlal b'negeh to writing Torah. Bo yiminei Abaye me Rabbe. So Abaye asked Rabbe the shaila, Ma'o lichtoiv megillah litinoik lislamed ba. Are you allowed to write a scroll of, let's say, one parsha in Torah or one section of the Torah for a child? You want to teach him Chumash, and you can't write him the whole Sefer Torah. You can't learn from a whole Sefer Torah. You want to write him just one Megillah to read from it. Are you allowed? So this is actually a similar thing to what we just discussed before. The Mefarshim here say that Rabbe before already said that to write just a Sefer that has in it only the Haftarah is not allowed. So according to that, why is Abai asking Rabbe the question here regarding writing a scroll for a child? It also shouldn't be allowed. But apparently he didn't hear what Rabbi said before regarding the Sefer of the Haftarah. So therefore he's asking over here the question regarding writing for a child. Now the Gemara explains the basis of this question here. So as we'll see soon in the Gemara, there's a machlokes b'negeya to how the Torah was originally written. The first time Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah for Klal Yisrael, how was the Torah originally written? Because the Eibishter was teaching Moshe Rabbeinu Torah, all the different parshas of the Torah, throughout the time that the Yidden were in the Midbar. So the question is, did Moshe Rabbeinu write the Torah piece by piece, or as the Gemara calls it, scroll by scroll, and then at the end he put it all together? Or was it all written together at the end? When it was all complete, then Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. So seemingly we could resolve the question regarding writing for a child from the way Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. It depends if Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it all complete, or did he write it scroll by scroll throughout the 40 years? So the Gemara says that this question is actually according to both of these opinions. This is a question both according to the opinion that says that the Torah was written piece by piece, or scroll by scroll, and only in the end of the 40 years was it put together. And it's also a question according to the opinion that says that the Torah was written complete at the end of the 40 years. It was not written piece by piece. The Gemara explains, it's a question according to the opinion that says that the Torah was written scroll by scroll. So should you say, even the Megillah Nitna, just like Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah scroll by scroll, every time he got a parsha or a mitzvah from the Eibishter, he wrote it down then. So then kaisven. Similarly, you could write for a child a piece of the Torah that you're learning with him now. Or perhaps we can't compare to them. Why? Because given the idbak, once later at the end, Moshe Rabbeinu joined all these Megillas together into one Sefer Torah. So now it's one Sefer Torah, and after that you can't write from the Torah just one scroll. It has to be written properly, a whole Sefer Torah together. Now, don't forget, this entire Gemara here is discussing when we're writing a Sefer Torah, like the proper halachas of writing a Sefer Torah on a scroll with a parchment, with all the halachas of a Sefer Torah. That's the whole. It's not talking about print on a chumash. This whole question is also according to the other opinion that says Torah chasuma nitna, that Moshe Rabbeinu did not write the Torah and a Megillah scroll by scroll. He wrote it all when it was complete at the end of the 40 years. So should I say, Kiv the chasuma nitna, just like the Torah itself was only written when it was complete, so en kaisven, you can't write for a child one section of the Torah to learn from. Or perhaps I could say, Kiv the lo yefsher, but when you're teaching a child, it's impossible to write for every child a whole Sefer Torah. So kasvina, maybe we could write for a child that scroll of a Sefer Torah separately. Amalei, so Rabba answered him, and this is similar to Rabba's opinion before regarding the Haftarah, ein kaisven. You cannot write for a child just one section of the Torah. Umatam, and what's the reason for this? Lefi she'ein kaisven, because you don't write. He didn't give him a reason, and he just said because you can't write the Sefer Torah just one part, you have to write the whole thing together. In other words, he's accepting the tzad that we said before, that even according to the opinion that Moshe Rabbeinu did write it separately during the 40 years, but once they joined it together as one Sefer Torah, a Sefer Torah could only be written whole together. So on this, Abai asked Rabbe Eisvei, but it says here an abraisa. Afhi asasa tavla. This is talking about Hilni Hamalka. So she made a tablet. She prepared a tabla shalzov, a golden tablet. Sheparsha saita ksuva aleh. And the parsha of the saita was written on this golden tablet. And what was the purpose for this? So like this, they had it prepared in the Beis Hamikdash, and if they had to write the scroll that was used for the saita that was put into the waters. So you're supposed to, whenever you write anything from the Torah, so you're supposed to write it mitoch haksav. You have to look into the way it's written in the Torah. From there, you can write the words of the Torah. So instead of having to write it from a whole Sefer Torah, so they had this tavla, this tablet prepared that they could write the Megillah of the saita from it. So what do you see over here? That they're writing a chelik of the Sefer Torah on this tavla, on this tavla shel zahav, even though it's not the entire Torah. Okay, so the Gemara answers, it's not a question. Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish mishum Rab Yanai. Rab Shimon ben Lakish answers in the name of Rab Yanai that what she made was ba'alav base. She didn't make this tavla shel zahav, that it was written, this parsha of the saita on it, word for word, but it was only written with aleph base, meaning the Rosh Tevis. And they were able to write from the Rosh Tevis of the parsha that was written on this tavla. But Eisvei, Abai asked him further, in another brisa it spells out and it says, Kishehu kaisiv, when you write the parsha of the saita, roye v'kaisev mashakasav b'tavla. He would see what was written in this tablet, and he would write over what was written in this tablet. So seemingly, he would write exactly all the words were written in this tablet, not just the Rashi Tevis. So Eimer, the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya, because even there you could interpret the words of this Braise, kemo shekasav betablet, similar to what's written in the tablet. The tablet was still just a Rashi Tevis, and they wrote over the parasha of the Saita from the Rashi Tevis. They wrote the full words. But Eisve, he asked him further from a third Braise, where it talks about how they wrote the parasha of the Saita from this tablet, and there it spells out even more. Kashu Kaisev, when he writes the parasha of the Saita, Roye betavla v'kaisev mashakasev betavla. He sees, he looks into the tablet that has the parasha of the Saita on it, and from there he sees and he writes the parasha of the Saita. Ma'al kasev betavla. Now, what is written on this tablet? It says im shachav, im loy shachav. These psukim where it says if this man was with you, if he was not with you, all the psukim. So it seems like it wasn't just a Rashi Tevis. They wrote the actual parsha of the Saita on this tablet. So the Gemara says, no, it's still not a question on Rabbah, because Hacha b'mayaskinon, even in this Braise, we could say what it means to say is Beseidigen. The pasuk was still written skipping, meaning at the beginning of the pasuk, the words were written out fully, but the continuation of the pasuk was still just written in a Rashi Tevis, and therefore it wasn't full psukim that were written here out of the whole Torah. So there's no shaila over here on what Rabbah said. Now the Gemara concludes this inyan that kitanoi, this shaila, whether you can write for a child from the Sefer Torah, a section of the Sefer Torah to learn from, this is a machlokes tanoim. Because it says in the Braise, Ein kaisvin megillah litinoik leslamed ba, you don't write a scroll, a portion of the Sefer Torah to learn from it. Ve'im daitoi lahashlim mutter. But if your intention here is you're writing one portion, you're just beginning to write the Sefer Torah, and meanwhile the child will learn from it, but you're going to continue, you're going to complete and write the whole Sefer Torah, so then it's allowed. So the Tanakam here says you have to write the whole Torah. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you could write sections from the Torah for the child to learn from, as long as you write a full inyan, a full subject. The Bereshis, for example, in Bereshis you write Ad Deira Mabel. If you write the first parsha until the Deira Mabel, so that's one section you can write for a child. The Teres Kainim, and Teres Kainim, which is Vayikra, so you write for the child from Vayikra Ad Vayihi Bayom Hashmini. That's the conclusion of all the Karbanis that it says in the beginning of Chumash Vayikra. So the Rabbi Yehuda clearly says you could write for a child a section in the Torah as long as it includes the whole inyan. So here, the Gemara now brings the source of the machlekes that the Gemara alluded to before. How did Moshe Rabbeinu write the Sefer Torah the first time when he wrote it for the Yidden? So Rabbi Yechanan Mishum Rabbina, Rabbi Yechanan said in the name of Rabbina, Torah, Megillah Nitna. The Torah was written the first time, scroll and one scroll and another scroll, along the 40 years when Moshe Rabbeinu got the mitzvahs. Shenamar, and we learned this from a pasuk in Tilim where it says, Oza Marti. David the Melech says, now I said, Hine basi b'Megillah Sefer Kosav Alai. Now I am in the Megillah of the Sefer, and it's written about me. What David the Melech was saying over here is, Rashi says that this is by David the Melech, that they said about him that because he came from Rus, and Rus was a Moavis. So Moav is not allowed to have any relation into Klal Yisrael, but then they darshaned Moavi v'loy Moavis, and they said that he's allowed to come into Klal Yisrael. So then David the Melech said that, I found a remes for myself that I could be found in the Torah. And Rashi here brings the remes that David HaMelech came from Moav, which came from the daughters of Lot, and there by the daughters of Lot, it says in the Lashon of the Pasuk, Shtei b'nei secha ha-nimtza'os. That Lashon nimtza'os is a remes to David HaMelech, because in Tilim it says, Matzasi David Avdi. David HaMelech was found. So David HaMelech is saying here that I found a hint for myself in the Torah. But the point is that it refers to the Sefer Torah as Megillah Sefer. Why is it referring to the Sefer Torah as Megillah Sefer? Because it was written one scroll at a time when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. That's the raya. Rav Shimon ben Lakish says, no, Torah Chasuma Nitna. The Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it at the end of the 40 years complete. Shenema, as the pasuk says, when Moshe Rabbeinu writes the Sefer Torah for the Yidden at the end of the 40 years, Lokoyach HaSefer HaTorah Hazai. So in the pasuk it actually says Hazeh. Take this Sefer Torah, meaning this as is complete. So he wrote it complete for the Yidden at the end. So the Gemara now explains both of these opinions there. Now ve'idach, the other opinion, Nami Yaksiv Lokoyach. Doesn't it say Lokoyach, take the whole Sefer Torah, that it was written complete? So the answer is, there's no raya from that. Tahula Basa de Idbak. In the beginning, it was written one scroll at a time when he got the mitzvahs, but then it was joined together as one Sefer Torah. And so that's Sefer Torah after it was joined together. Ve'edoch, now the other opinion, Nam Yaksiv, b'Megillah Sefer Kosav Alai. In the Pasuk in Tillim, it refers to the Sefer Torah as a Megillah, meaning it was written one scroll at a time. So the Gemara answers also not a raya. Who the Chala Torah Kula Ikri Megillah? We find Bechlal that the entire Torah is referred to as a scroll, as a Megillah. The Chsiv, as it says in the Pasuk, Vayome Elai Ma Taroya, Vayma Ani Roya Megillah Ofa. I see a Megillah, I see a Sefer Torah which is flying. So it refers to the whole Sefer Torah as a Megillah. That's one pshat. Inami, the Gemara says another pshat, L'Keder Rab Levi, that the fact that the Torah is referred to as a Megillah, even though Moshe Rabbeinu only wrote the entire Torah at the end as one whole thing, Chasuma, but nevertheless, there was, even according to this opinion, there was sections of the Torah that were written separately before. Because like Rab Levi said, the Amar Rab Levi, Shmeine Parshiyas Nemru B'Yom Shehukam B'Ya Mishkan. On a Chodesh Nisan, the day that the Mishkan was put up, on that day there were 8 Parshiyas that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Yidden, and because they needed those parshiyas, those mitzvahs, they needed to know them and learn them at that time, those parshiyas were written at that time. Right, so the rest of the Torah was written all together at the end. But there were these 8 parshiyas that Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Yidden at that time, and these 8 parshiyas, as we'll see, the Gemara will tell us what these 8 parshiyas are not 8 parshiyas in the same place in the Torah. There are different places in the Torah. So those 8 parshiyas, with the sections of the Torah that were in between, were written separately and were then connected to the rest of the whole Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote at the end. What are these 8 parshiyas that they needed to learn and know for that day? Elohein, these are the parshas. Parshas Kayanim, the parsha, the halachas of the Kayanim, which is Parshas Emor, the halacha of that is said over there for all the Kayanim, the Tumman, the Mumin, and everything else that it says in Parshas Emor for the Kayanim. Parshas Leviim, the parsha of the Leviim, where it says how you take the Leviim to come serve in the Mishkan, which is in Parshas Baloischa. Or Parshas Tmeim, another parsha which is also in Baloischa, the parsha of the Tmeim. Rashi says this refers to the parsha of Pesach Sheni. They were taught this already on a Chodesh Nisan to know the halachas of who's Tamei and who's not, to be matayar themselves to be able to bring the Korban Pesach. And a Parshas Shiluach Tmeim, also the Parsha, this is in Parshas Nasai, where it talks about the halachas of the people that are Tamid that have to be sent out of the Machne, whether it's a Tmei Meis, a Tzirua, a Zav. This was only relevant here when they built the Mishkan. Now you had the Machne Shechina, the Machne Levia, and then Machne Yisrael. And Parshas Achri Meis, the Parsha of Achri Meis that talks about the halachas of Yom Kippur. It was also taught on that day about the halachas about the you're not allowed to enter into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and only on Yom Kippur could you enter. And in Parshas Shesuya Yayin, the Parsha which says in Parsha Shmini that you shouldn't drink wine when you come into the Beis HaMikdash, because the Isser began on that day when they put up the Mishkan. Uparshas Neidus, then the beginning of Baloischa, the Parsha of lighting the Menorah. Uparshas Paraduma, and the last was the Parsha of Paraduma, which began on this day, because only when they have the Mishkan, as Rashi says here, Noichach Panei Oil Mayid, then could they have a Paraduma. So this was the day when they taught the Parsha of Paraduma. Okay, so that's the machlokes over here regarding how the Torah was written. Just to mention one pointer that Tosfos here says, Tosfos brings a pasuk that says in Mishpatim, it says the Vayikach Sefer Habris Vayikra Ba'oznei Ha'am. And Rashi there says, what is this referring to? What's the Sefer Habris? That he wrote the Chumash from Bereshis until Mishpatim. So how can you say this pshat according to the opinion that says Torah Chasuma Nitna, that the Torah was only written at the end, all the way at the end of the 40 years? That's the question that Tosfos over here asks. So Tosfos over here says a different pshat in the Gemara. The opinion that says Chasuma Nitna does not mean that the Torah was not written until the end of the 40 years. It was written throughout the 40 years, but Chasuma Nitna means it was written in order. The way the Eibush just said the mitzvahs to the Yidden and the way it's written in the order of Torah is not necessarily the same, because Ein Muktim U'Ma'ocher B'Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it during the 40 years in the order, the way it was going to appear eventually later in the Torah. That's what Chasuma means. The opinion that says Megillah Nitna means he wrote it throughout the 40 years right away when he got the mitzvah, not necessarily in the order the way it was said. That's Tosfos' pshat in the Gemara. But Rashi, there's a sikha from the Rebbe about this in Chelek Chaf Aleph, Makut Sichas, Parshas Mishpatim. The Rebbe says, according to Rashi, the opinion that says Chasuma holds that it was written all the way at the end, but there were certain inyanim of mitzvahs that he wrote along the way, and it wasn't like part of the Torah. It was the Sefer HaBris. It was an inyan of Yidden being able to learn from the mitzvahs that they should be able to make a bris with the Eibush. It's a different inyan. It's not this inyan of the Sefer Torah. Okay, another subject here regarding the Torah. Amar Abba Laza, Torah, Roiv b'ksav, most of the Torah we learn out, most of the halachas of the Torah we learn out from what's actually written in the Torah, and Rashi says that includes not only what's actually written, but it also includes the different drashas that we learn out from the Torah, and Rashi gives two examples, like klal prat, or agzeir shava, which is learned from the actual words of the Torah, umiyot al peh, and only a minority of the Torah is things that we learn from a tradition, the oral tradition, meaning like a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which has no hint from the words of what's written in the Torah. Shanamar, because we could see it says in the pasuk as follows: Echtoiv loy roiv teiraisai. The Eibusha says, I write for the Yidden most of the halachas of the Torah, and k'maizar nechshavu. And nevertheless, they treat it like something which is strange to them. So we see this is the Eibusha, this is the muster that the Navi gives the Yidden, but we see here that it says that most of the Torah is written. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Roiv al peh. Most of the Torah is actually, most halachas cannot be learned from the words of the Torah. And most of it is an oral tradition. Umiyut b'ksav. It's only a minimal, the smaller part of the Torah could be learned from what's actually written in the Torah. Shanema, because we see it says in the pasuk, ki al pi hadvarim eila. So al pi hadvarim eila means that we learn from the Torah al pi, meaning al peh, verbally, not from what's written inside the Torah. Now, this machlekes here is very hard to understand because the pashtus you see that the halachas of halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which are only an oral tradition, is the minority. Most of halachas of Torah are either written clearly in the Torah or are learned from things that are like a gzeir shava and different drashas that you could learn from the actual words in the Torah. How could there be an opinion that says that most of it is al peh? So the Mefarshim say that Rabbi Yochanan held that even things that are learned from drashas like Gzeir Shava or Hekish, Klal Prat is considered to be al peh because it's not written clearly in the Torah. That's what the argument here is about. So the Gemara. Right. So all of this is considered. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, all of the drashas of the Gemara is considered to be al peh because it's not written explicitly. But according to the other opinion here, what was the first opinion here? Rabbi Lazar, all those drashas is considered to be b'ksav because it's darshan from words in the Torah. Now, ve'edach nami haksiv echtov loy rube teiraisai. According to Rabbi Yochanan, doesn't it clearly say that the Eibusha says, I write most of my Torah? So the answer is no. Hahu atmui kametame. You have to read that the Eibusha is saying it as a wonder. Echtov loy rube teiraisai. Is it any worth that I should write the Yidden most of my Torah? Even if I would write them most of my Torah, it would still be something they would treat as a zar, as strange to them. But it's only a wonder, but not that the Eibusha actually did so. But naveidach nami, according to the other opinion, according to Rabbi Lazar, haksiv ki al pi advarim eila, that the Eibusha says you can keep the mitzvahs only al pi advarim, which means bal peh, verbally, and it's not written in the Torah. So he answers no. Hahu mishum de tkifu l'migmerinu. Over there, what it's saying is the Eibusha is making a covenant with Yidden that they should keep Torah. And when it comes to the dvarim that are bal peh, because that's something that's more difficult to keep, because you don't see it written in the Torah, so he's saying that the bris is referring to the dvarim shebal peh. But it doesn't mean that most of Torah is bal peh. Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachmani darshan meturgamani de Rab Shimon ben Lakish. He was the meturgaman, the interpreter that explained the words of Rab Shimon ben Lakish. And here comes the ain that was already mentioned before. I mentioned before regarding Torah shebiksav, that you're not allowed to learn it bal peh, and regarding Torah shebal peh, that it shouldn't be written b'chsav. So he said as follows: Ksiv, it says in this pasuk here, Ksiv l'chas advarim eila. So ksav or ksav l'chas advarim eila. Beginning it says, write these words. And then then the pasuk says ki al pi advarim eila, which means according to what's said verbally, that you'll be able to fulfill the mitzvahs. So hakeitzad, what does this mean? Should it be written or is it only al peh, verbally? So we learn from this that there's two sections of Torah. Dvarim shebiksav, those things of Torah shebiksav. You're not allowed to say an entire pasuk of Torah shebiksav verbally. Dvarim shebal peh, those sections that are of Torah, which are bal peh, which is the oral tradition, it should not be said and written down and to read it from a ksav. That's what the Torah is telling us here. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shmuel, he learned this out from a different place. It says, it could have said in the pasuk eile. It says over here, ki al pi advarim ha eile. Okay, so we learned from the word eile. Eile ata kaisev. So these things, these matters over here, the Torah shebiksav, that could be written, but v'yata kaisev halachas, the halachas of Torah shebal peh should not be written. Okay, so now regarding this is what the Gemara brought before, that later on, came a time when the Yidden were forgetting the Torah, so the Eibishter himself says that you could write down even Dvarim Shebal Peh. But I should mention here, this is a famous thing, that this inyan of Dvarim Shebechsav, people are not makbid on this, but it's Yidua that the Rebbe, you heard it by Fabrengens, whenever the Rebbe quoted a pasuk in Torah, the Rebbe would always say it with a change of a word, not exactly the way it's written in the Torah, because of this inyan. Dvarim Shebechsav, you're not supposed to say it a full pasuk the way it is, Bal Peh. There are discussions about this, Hateirim and different Teifanim, but the Rebbe was machmir kipshutei not to say a pasuk in Torah Bal Peh.
Why is that?
That's what we learn out here. Dvarim Shebechsav, the Eibishter wants you to look inside, so you should know it, say it correctly, dafke inside, not Bal Peh. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, "Leikaras Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'risam Yisrael." The Eibishter did not make a covenant with Yidden, ela b'shvil dvarim shebal peh, only for the purpose of Yidden fulfilling the Torah shebal peh. Shenemar, as we see here in this pasuk, it says, "Ki al pi hadvarim eile karati itcha bris ves Yisrael." So it says al pi hadvarim, referring to the Torah, the verbal Torah, the Torah shebal peh. That's what the Eibishter makes a covenant with Yidden. As we saw before, the Gemara says the dvarim shebal peh is more difficult to keep. It's something that you can forget easier, and it's with this that the Eibishter made the covenant with Yidden. Now, going back to the Mishnah mentioned another thing that the Chazal instituted for Darkei Shalom. So the Mishnah said, "Ma'arvim bebayis yashon mipnei Darkei Shalom." That they said that when you put the eruv chatzeris, so the food for the eruv chatzeris is placed into the house that it was always placed in, you don't switch from one house to another. So the Gemara explains, my time, what's the reason for this? Is it because of the honor? Once you chose one home and he's the one that has the Eruv Chatzeris for everyone, so now it's not right to take away that privilege from him. That can't be the reason. Because V'hahu Shipura, there was this shofar. And Rashi says this wasn't a shofar that was used just on Rosh Hashanah, but this was a shofar that they used every Erev Shabbos to blow from it to remind people that Shabbos is coming. The Havimei Kare Beit Rav Yehuda. So this shofar was first in the house of Rabbi Yehuda, but then Ulubusaif Bei Rabbe, they switched it and they brought it to the house of Rabbe. Ulubusaif Bei Rabbi Yosef, then it was brought to Rabbi Yosef's house. Ulubusaif Bei Abaya, then it was switched to Abaya's house. Ulubusaif Bei Rabbe, and Rabbe that is, and then it was brought to Rabbe. So here Rashi explains it depends who was the Rosh Hashiva. When one passed away, so then it was switched from one home to another. Okay, there's another pshat here in Rashi that says Shipura does not refer to this shofar, but Shipura actually refers to a box where they would give the donations for the yeshiva. So they switched it from one home to another, depends who was the Rosh Hashiva. So you see here that they didn't keep it in the place where it was till now, even though the honor is being taken away from one home to another. So the same with the Eruv Chatzeris, there shouldn't be an issue switching it from one home to another if this was the reason. Ella, rather the reason is Mishum Chashode, that there could be a suspicion. If the Eruv Chatzeris is kept in one home, and then someone comes in that home and he sees that the Eruv Chatzeris is not there, he may think that there's no Eruv Chatzeris. Doesn't know that it's in another home, and he may think that the people here in this chotzer are carrying without the native, and that itself could bring to a fight. That's why the Mishnah uses the term Darkei Shalom. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was Ba'ishru Karav La'ama V'chulu. So what is this talking about? We're talking here about different fields that are along a stream, and you have the upstream and downstream. It's flowing down, and the Mishnah there said that each property, each field had their pit, that they would take water from this stream into their pit, so they should have a storage of water to be used for their field. So now it goes downstream. So the Mishnah there said that Chazal instituted a seder of who gets to divert the water into his pit first and who gets it next. So in the Mishnah, it simply said that the one that is upstream and the stream is flowing to him first, he could divert the water into his pit before someone else. So Itmer, the Gemara brings, is a machlekes about this, Bnei Nara, the people that are there near the river. So who gets to divert the water into his pit first? Rav Oma Tatoi Shasamai Bereisha. The ones that are downstream, they are the ones that could divert the water into their pit first for their field. Shmuel says, Eloi Shasu Mayim Bereisha. No, the ones that are upstream and the water flows to them first, they're the ones that could divert the water into their pit first. So the Gemara explains, Bida Mazel, if this water is flowing, meaning you don't have to divert the water into your pit. While the water is flowing in the stream, you can take water from it into your pit without stopping the flow of the water. So then Kula Amalei Pligi. There's no argument over here who goes first, who goes next. Anyone could just divert or take water into his pit because the water is going to continue flowing. Ki pligi, when is their argument over here? If you have to divert the water, if you have to clog the flow of the water and divert it into your pit, so here there's a machlokes, who gets to do that first? Shmuel says the one that's there upstream, the one that the water flows to him first, could divert it into his pit, because Maya, again, Shmuel's explanation here is Eloi Shasu Maya Bereisha. The ones that are on the top, they're the ones that get to drink. They are the ones that get to divert the water first, because the Amri, they say, Anan Mekarvinan Tvei, because we're closer. If the water comes to us first, so we get to take the water first into our pit, and then afterwards we'll allow the water to flow further. But Rav says, the ones that are downstream, they're the ones that get to divert the water into their pit first, because the Amri, they say, Nare kapashte lezel, allow the water to naturally flow to where it's flowing to. To us, if you allow the water to naturally flow, so then we are going to take the water first. When we divert the water, we're not taking it away from the natural flow from anyone else. So therefore, let us fill up our pit first. And then afterwards, someone else could divert. Why should we allow someone else to divert and take it away from its natural flow to the bottom? So the Gemara now asks on Rav's opinion. The Mishnah seemed to say clearly, like Shmuel, Tanan, it said in our Mishnah, that pit that's the closest to this irrigation channel of the water, he's the one that's first on the top of the stream. He's the one that fills up his pit first, and that's the Chazal's takana for peace, that he gets the first opportunity to do so. And Rav said that no, it's the guy that's downstream that gets to do it first. So the Gemara answers, Tergem Shmuel, Aliba de Rav, Shmuel answered for Rav's opinion, Ba'ama hamisaleches al pi bayrei. Over there, in the Mishnah, it's when he doesn't have to divert the water into his pit and clog it up from its flow. Over there, the water is flowing over his pit, and he could very easily have the water go into his pit. So it just flows over. So therefore, he can get the water first. But in a case where he has to clog up the water, to divert the water, there Rav says, the one that's at the bottom of the stream, he's the one that gets it first, because he says, let the water just flow naturally to me first. Says the Gemara, if that's what the Mishnah is talking about, that it just goes right over his pit, so what's the chiddush that he gets to take the water first into his pit? Says the Gemara, no, because I would think to say, Matzi Amrile, the other people that are further downstream can come and tell him, Sochar Mischar, you should clog up your pit, and then Va'ashki Behindize. And then you should have to then go and by hand take the water from this stream and put it into your pit. So what's their argument? What they're saying is that by allowing this stream to flow over your pit and fill up your pit, it slows down the flow of the stream to us in the bottom. So true, it just naturally goes over the pit and you don't have to divert the water, but maybe you should have to clog up your pit to allow the water to flow properly to the bottom. That's why Mishnah is saying that we allow him to take the water into his pit. Ravuna bar Tachlifa said about this argument, we didn't learn who the halacha is like here, not like Rav and not like Shmuel. So then what do we do? Kol dalam gava. So whoever is going to be stronger, he's going to be the one that will fill up his pit first. Rashi here says, but really the halacha should be like Shmuel, because by money matters, we pass like Shmuel. Okay, so the Gemara here brings an interesting story about this. Rav Shimi Barashi Asa l'kamed Abaye. Rav Shimi Barashi approached Abaye, and Amalei says to Abaye, Loisvan mar bidna, make a time to sit with me and learn with me. Amalei, Abaye told him, Isli idne lididi, I have time for myself, meaning I'm busy with things that I'm doing, learning with myself. I don't have time to learn with you. So Rav Shimi Barashi asked him, Loisvan mar belelia, so make time for me in the evening to learn with me. Amalei, so he told him, but Isli Maya Lashkui. But then in the evening, I have the irrigation in my property that I have to take care of getting the water from the stream into the pit from my field. I don't have time then. Amalei, so Rav Shimi Barashi says to Abaye, Ano mashkinele lamar Maya biyamama. I'll take of your water that you need for your field during the day, and then v'loisvamar b'lelia, you'll have time to learn with me at night. So Amalei lachaya. Abaye says, great, very good plan. So what did he do? Rav Shimi Barashi went, he wanted to get this job done very quickly. So now where was Abaye's field situated? As we'll see here in the continuation of the Gemara, Abaye's field was situated right in the middle. There were people upstream, and there were people downstream, and he was somewhere in the middle. So Azali Loi, so this Rav Shimi Barashi, he went to the people that were upstream, and Amaluhu, he told them, Tatoi Shosamai Beresha. You know that we paskin like the halacha, that the ones that are downstream, they're the ones that have to get the water first. So don't clog up the water, don't divert the water, allow it to flow all the way downstream first. And then Azal Tatoi, he went to the people that were all the way downstream, and Amalahu, and he told them, you know what the halacha is? The people that are upstream, they're the ones that are supposed to get the water first. So allow the ones at the upstream to clog the water. So now what happened? Adahachi, now in between, so the guy on the upstream did not clog the water, and he allowed it to flow down, and in between, Sachar Miskev Ashki, he went and clogged the water and diverted it into the middle field for Abaya. So the person at the bottom had no tinus because he thought that the person upstream clogged it up for himself, and the person upstream thought that the guy in the bottom is using it first for himself. And so he was able to do the job in Abaya's field very quickly, so he can go and learn with Abaya. So Kiyasla Kamed Abaya, when he came to Abaya, Amalei, so he told him, Abaya was wondering that how he did it so quickly. So Amalei Kibei Trey, obviously. You did for me. So he said to him, you did for me like two different opinions at the same time. You're telling the ones at the top stream that you're pasking one way, and then you're telling the people in the bottom of the stream that you're pasking another way. And Veloy Tamino Abaye Lepeded Ahishata. Abaye did not want to taste any of the fruits from that year that grew there in the field because of what he did over here. This trick that he made, that he pasking like two opinions at the same time, just for his own benefit of his field. Another story here, Hanu b'nei Becharmach. These people of Becharmach, the Ozil Kodu Beresha the Shamvasa. What they did was they had a property and they wanted that the irrigation channel should come around their whole property. Should go around, and they were further down in the stream, but they wanted it to go around their whole property. So they dug first that the channel should be diverted to go around their property. And then Vahadrua v'Shadua b'Shil Yanada. So it went. So they had to go around on the bottom of there around their whole property. So what happened? Also Eloi lekamed Abaya. So the ones that were further up the stream, they came to Abaya. Omrulei, they said to him, Kamaskal anaden. What happens now is because he diverted the stream further down on the field, so now it ruins the flow of the water upstream. When you divert the water lower down in the stream, so what happens? So then the water upstream, because it's getting diverted, it flows slower, so it's going to overflow. So it's a problem for our fields. Amaluhu. So Abaye says to them, "What's the big deal? You can fix this. So dig in the stream a little bit deeper. So if the stream will be deeper, it won't overflow." Amrulei, but they said, "No, we're afraid to do that. We're going to dig deeper. What may happen is kayav shipaden. And what may happen is the stream now is not going to flow good enough, and then our fruits will dry up." So the kids, they had a tiny to this guy at the bottom of the stream that diverted it around this property that caused that the flow on the top of the stream wasn't good. So Amalahu, so he said to them, Zilus lika nafshaychem yihosam. So he said to the people that were at he said to them that to the Bnei Charmach, to these people at the bottom of the stream, he said, take away what you did, take away this diversion that you did around your property so that it should flow properly on the top of the stream.